I'm starting to understand now why literally every booktuber goes through a One Piece phase, because you guys are ravenous. Welcome back to One Piece Only Lore, this week brought to you by One Piece or something. Um, we're not shifting gears to a One Piece specific channel, but I made that episode mostly as a format experiment with no real preparation. So maybe the franchise does need a bit more investigation, and apologies and corrections. I still haven't watched the anime or read the manga. My apologies. I don't know when I'm going to try doing either of those things. To be perfectly honest, I find the anime really aggravating. There's something about the vocal performances, or possibly just the pacing of it, that I find really off and difficult to deal with. But again, this could just be a Steven Universe scenario. I found that series really annoying until it caught me, and then I was 100% in until it was done. So there is absolutely every possibility that I am going to get hooked on this series the next time I give it a try.
There are millions of possibilities for the future, but it's up to you to choose which becomes reality.
Maybe the idea of getting into a 1,000 episode anime feels ambitious to me, I guess. And so does the idea of reading 110 books. Like, I don't know if everybody understands the level of commitment that they are asking for when they say that somebody should watch or read One Piece, but 110 books is a lot of books. But maybe I'll give it a shot. I'm thinking about doing it with an eye towards stealing things for tabletop stuff, because that's kind of how I do things, I guess, or something. I do need to address the reindeer in the room. Yes, Chopper is a druid. He is not a cleric. I just kind of forgot druids exist, to be honest, and Halson, my beloved, I am so sorry.
When the others are sleeping, we'll slip away together. And we won't get much sleep.
But the real reason that I'm doing a follow-up at all was this comment. You are absolutely right, Think Crown. I fucked up. I did a plot. This video is my apology, specifically to you. The rest of y'all can hang out if you want, I guess. So with the understanding that I still haven't read the manga, and I still haven't watched the anime, I did the next best thing. Research. Like a nerd. Did this involve spoiling a bunch of stuff for myself? Yeah, and I don't actually mind that. I am not a person who hates spoilers particularly. I actually find that my enjoyment of a thing is improved when I have spoilers to look forward to. So maybe this will get me to read the manga. Let's go. And spoilers for all of One Piece, I guess.
What are spoilers? Time is an illusion, you fuck!
Giant spoiler warning. I don't know where any of this information actually lands in the story, so I could be spoiling the most recent episode of the show right now, and I would have no idea. As I noted in my last video, and as a bunch of you commented, there is a lot of great stuff to steal in this series, and it isn't limited to the house rules as an item. In fact, and I know I might catch some shit for this, I think that devil fruits may be the least interesting lore in One Piece. You eat an apple-sized grape made of Play-Doh and now you're Sandman or something? Nah. Deleting a whole century worth of history, though, that's got some legs on it. Especially when you've got a world-spanning organization like the world government or the Catholic Church. In One Piece, the world government has essentially deleted 100 years of history from 900 years ago to 800 years ago. Every scrap of information that could be found about it has been completely destroyed, with the exception of some huge puzzle boxes called poneglyphs. Poneglyphs? Poneglyphs. We're going to go with poneglyphs. And the world government has criminalized research into that area. They consider it the most vile crime that you can commit. The Five Elders, Knights of God, and Emu, who are a bunch of people that I know literally nothing about, but they have names that are all in capitals, so they seem important, are adamant that this is exactly as it should be, and work really hard to make sure that nobody finds out the truth. Entire countries have been wiped off the map to keep these secrets. There are a bunch of puzzle boxes scattered around the globe that contain the secrets of this lost century. So what do you do with this in D&D? I mean, obviously questing to solve what happened could just be its own campaign. Like, literally discover the secrets of the lost century could be a quest all its own, especially if you decide to hide the puzzle boxes in dungeons all over the world. So that one seems kind of simple, but as part of a larger campaign, I think it really opens up some options for you. Conspiracy theories that can't be disproven because, I don't know, Void Century. Important artifacts gone forever because their whereabouts were burned during the Lost Century. Ancient evils that are about to come back. Anybody know their weakness? Well, we did before the church threw them all out during the Great History Purge. The options here are not quite limitless because one of the interesting things that happens with D&D, I guess, is that there will be people who were alive then, right? Like, you have species of intelligent creatures that live for thousands of years. So if you delete a century 800 years ago, there's a bunch of people who, for them, that was a week ago. But for most normal people, you can absolutely delete an entire century out of history, and that is going to create a black hole of information for anything that could have happened during that span of time. We've got dynasties of royals that come and go. We've got entire kingdoms that are founded and destroyed in that time. We have the possibility for great evils that were squashed and buried, and we know that they might be coming back someday, but they're so dangerous that we couldn't risk anybody finding them. It's really rich with possibilities, and I think that it's something that more franchises could use. I honestly think that, like, Eberron in particular kind of has a version of this with their last war. Like, the amount of chaos that happened in the 100-Year War that leads up to the beginning of Eberron creates a lot of opportunity for disinformation and for different countries to have different ideas of how different things went down. So that, I think, already exists in some places in some ways, but I love the idea of a large authority figure just deciding that part of history is too much and yanking it out of the history books. Absolutely brilliant. There's something about a beginner's area that I love. It's good to have a spot where people can learn the basics of how the game works and how the world works without everything being a world-ending threat. But how do you corral your players into the beginning area without them traipsing off into the wild blue, especially when your story is about being able to sail pretty much anywhere? If you're on a boat, if you have a mode of transportation, airships are another great example. If you have an airship, your players aren't stuck where they are. Travel becomes part of the equation. And so the way that One Piece solved this was they created the Red Line, a huge strip of land that is impossible to traverse except for a very few select points on the map. Now, one thing that I did note in watching the One Piece live action is that the Red Line is, according to Nami, I think just like some doldrums, right? Like it's a big calm area where you sail into it and your sail's empty from the wind. So that maybe isn't as interesting as having like a geological feature loom 300 feet into the air in all directions. But that creates some interesting problems and also comes with some interesting solutions. Like, trade becomes localized around whatever passes exist in that wall. In One Piece, that means the capital of the world government and the underwater home of the fish people. Or, if you're feeling particularly spunky, you can go to the other side of the world and go up the skill challenge mountain and do a skill challenge and then get eaten by a whale. In your world, your impassable terrain creates two distinct opportunities. You get a starting area that is geographically protected and a funnel to specific places if your party is going to progress. It provides a locational railroad, of sorts, where your players have to interact with a few places if they're going to move through the rest of the story. And that means that you have the opportunity to set particular pieces of the narrative in those areas, right? So if there are specific places that you need players to go, geographically blocking it so that they are only able to go to that area. I mean, obviously it's going to feel like railroading because it kind of is, but it also creates some additional mystery, right? Like, why is this the only place that people can get through? What enables this place to be accessible from both sides, if it is accessible from both sides? Those funnels also create a lot of power for whoever holds those passes. It isn't a coincidence that the world government capital city controls one of the only methods for crossing the red line. It provides them power. It gives them an opportunity to control trade. If you want to get through the red line, you have to go through the world government, which means that you have to be legitimate by them. And that creates a power dynamic where they are able to control who and what gets through that area.
Destiny, fate, dreams. As long as there are people who seek freedom in this life, these things shall not vanish from the earth.
The main theme of One Piece, as far as I can tell, appears to be inherited will. And that's something that you can even leave more or less in the hands of your players. At its most basic, One Piece is about the quests and the dreams that you inherit from the people who came before you. That isn't necessarily genetic or familiar inheritance, but instead taking up the causes that somebody else has inspired you to strive for. Becoming the greatest at a thing, reaching to be the king of the pirates, or the world's greatest chef, or the world's best swordsman, or navigate across the entire world and make a map. These are the goals and the quests and the dreams of the characters that are going to be pushing your story forward. And that doesn't need to be mechanical. There isn't a necessity that this is going to have rules attached to it. You can if you want to. Like, if you wanted to mechanically represent this, what I would maybe do is have each of the player characters choose an NPC that inspired them to reach for that goal. Or maybe even just most of them, right? Because, like, as far as I can tell, Nami's dream doesn't appear to have been influenced by anyone. Again, not a manga reader. The whole thing with her family, they seemed very nice, but the one lady seemed a lot more about oranges than she did about maps. But, like, being the originator of that dream can also be the mechanics that you want to introduce there, right? So you choose the NPC that's going to inspire you to do that thing, or you decide that this character is going to be the originator of that dream and pass that dream down along the generations. And One Piece isn't really a generational show in the same way that something like Boruto is. Like, there's a sense of generationality and historicity that comes from the inherited dreams that creates a bit of a through line for the series, right? Like, we have Goldie Roger and his One Piece. Obviously, that's the big one, and a lot of pirates got their dream from becoming the quote-unquote king of the pirates. But that isn't the only one. And other characters, like the relationship between Sanji and Zeph is a really good example, where, like, Zeph isn't dead. Zeph is living his life, doing his thing, but he's given up on his dream. And that means that somebody else, in this case Sanji, needs to take that up and reach for and strive for that dream. And that generationality, that sense of time and that sense of achieving the goals of the people who came before you is important to how One Piece works, but it can also influence how your games work, right? Like, we see this a lot, I think, with early gear. And with One Piece, we see this as well with, like, Luffy's hat, right? Like, Luffy is not the original owner of his hat. He got it from Shanks. Shanks apparently got it from Goldie Roger. I don't know where Goldie Roger got it from. It seems like it is likely that it didn't originate with him either. But the idea of having your weapon handed down to you from your father, right? Randall Thor getting the heron-marked blade from Tam, or Sturm Brightblade wearing his father's armor, or even Roland's six guns from the Dark Tower, all of these have a connection to history that is more personal and direct than anything that you're going to get from, I bought this +1 sword at a store. And One Piece kind of subverts this a little bit by having Zoro go into a sword store to buy some Masterwork swords and coming out with some free Masterwork +1 swords, some magic swords maybe, a cursed sword. Don't know if that curse is coming back. Probably. Every time I say that I'm not sure if something is coming back, somebody in the comments was like, it's coming back. Don't worry about it. You'll see in season 37. So chances are we're going to see whatever that curse is, but it still isn't as important as the blade that he inherited from his late friend. So Think Crown, I hope that this has made up at least some for my foray into dreaded plot. I promised no plot. Hopefully I didn't get into that territory today. I've been told that I need to work on my outros, so I guess if you made it this far, I'm going to invite you to suggest an outro for my next video. Whoever gets the most likes, assuming that it won't get me canceled, I'm going to read it exactly as is, as my outro for next week. But this one's just going to end now. Okay, bye.